It seems like just yesterday the Twilight Saga had everybody talking about vampires. Now with movies including the upcoming Blade reboot, it seems like it's time for these fantasy creatures to shine once again. Well, not literally shine, that's strictly a Twilight thing, and I hope it stays that way. Since Sony is introducing Morbius, the living vampire, to the big screen, I can't help but wonder how he would stack up against one of their other major movie characters, Venom. Tom Hardy's Venom managed to save the day in his debut film, but would he be able to hold his own in a fight against Morbius? Unlike the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Sony's universe of Marvel characters is not nearly as well established, and its name is nowhere near as catchy. Their Venom movie was a success at the box office considering their backlog of comic book movies that never got made. The fact that Morbius is actually happening is frankly pretty impressive. Now, I'm not comparing Morbius and Venom solely because they're two of the non-Spider-Man characters Sony has actually managed to make movies about. These two actually have a lot of similarities in terms of their origin stories and abilities, but that doesn't mean Morbius wouldn't reduce Venom to a shivering pile of symbiote if they came face to face. If you're not totally up to date on all your Morbius lore, don't worry, I got you. He's not one of the most well-known Spider-Man characters out there, but that doesn't mean he isn't chock full of awesome powers. Dr. Michael Morbius wasn't always a vampire. At one point, he was just a boy growing up in Greece with a single mother. To make his childhood both more complicated and more unpleasant, Morbius was stricken with a rare and debilitating blood disease. It had a negative impact on his health, and it really didn't help him out in the looks department. This led to him becoming lonely and isolated, but beneath that, rough-looking exterior was a brilliant scientific mind. He grew up to be a Nobel Prize-winning biochemist and moved to New York City, a hotspot for superhuman activity in the world of comic books. He used his scientific knowledge to try and find a cure for his condition, which wasn't a bad idea. But somewhere around the combination of vampire bats and electroshock therapy, things went terribly wrong. I know, it's surprising that his Middle Ages Plague Doctor caliber plan didn't work out. In fact, it made him look kind of like a vampire bat with fangs and a flattened nose. He was also stricken by the standard vampire weaknesses of sunlight and the reliance on blood to survive. But the plus side is that as far as weaknesses go, that's pretty much it for the guy. Even sunlight doesn't cause him to explode or anything, it just doesn't feel particularly nice on his pale skin. His biggest weakness is his never-ending thirst. He needs to feed at least a few times a week in order to keep himself in tip-top shape. Without it, he becomes weak and has a difficult time reining in his violent vampire tendencies. Since he's not a real vampire, he doesn't care about things like religious iconography, silver, or wooden stakes. In summation, he's really tough to take down. His greatest weakness is his hunger, and, well, you try keeping him away from a meal. Now, let's talk about Venom. He's a much more well-known character, and if you're like me, then you probably got suckered into seeing the movie because you wanted to know how they got around the issue of Spider-Man not being a part of the story. Venom is an alien symbiote who was created by the Dark Elder god Null. He spends some time acting as a living outfit for Peter Parker, but later bonds with disgraced reporter Eddie Brock over their mutual grudges against Spider-Man. Venom needs to have a host in order to be truly effective, and he has some other weaknesses. First, there's his Null, who's able to dominate any of the symbiotes he created. But since Morbius doesn't have any kind of connection to this ancient deity, let's just take him out of the equation. The alien symbiote has two main weaknesses: heat and sonic attacks. They're hugely exploitable weaknesses, especially by someone with a little bit of scientific know-how. In the comics, Mr. Fantastic helped Spider-Man remove the symbiote. But I don't think the brilliant Morbius would have any trouble devising a similar solution. Come on, don't be fooled by his failed electric bat experiment. He's a genuinely smart guy. He also has some insight into another one of Venom's weaknesses. In the Venom movie, Eddie Brock encounters the symbiote and is overcome with a seemingly insatiable hunger. I'm not saying I relate to his frantic and horrifying eating habits, but I get it. Like Morbius, Venom needs to eat, and when he gets hungry, he gets out of control. Okay, maybe I relate to him a little bit. As far as stacking up their weaknesses goes, Venom has many more deficits that could easily be exploited, especially for someone like Morbius. He specialized in human and animal biology, so it's not a stretch to think he could figure out some interesting facts about the alien symbiote. Namely, how to reduce him to a quivering pile of goo. Beings like Venom are slightly outside of his area of expertise, but he's definitely on the right track. Meanwhile, Venom would likely have a much harder time trying to figure out what Morbius is and how to best fight the guy. And when you're having a superhuman showdown, every single moment matters. If you find that your homepage is weak against the mighty YouTube algorithm, don't don't worry, because there's a solution so simple you don't have to be a scientist to figure it out. Just click on that old subscribe button and then turn on your notifications. Also, make sure to adjust them from the settings menu if you're on your phone. And now that we're done tearing down Morbius and Venom, let's talk about some of their greatest strengths. Even if you're not very familiar with Morbius specifically, I'm going to guess that you probably know a few things about vampires. Even though he didn't become vampiric in the old-fashioned way, Morbius shares many similarities with traditional vampires. He's incredibly strong, and the more well-fed he is, the mightier his muscles are. At his peak, he can easily lift about 1,500 pounds, which is pretty much nothing compared to what Venom can do. Although the symbiote's strength can vary depending on his host, he's stronger than Spider-Man, who can lift buses and hurl wrecking balls. But if you're thinking this fact is going to make me change my opinion that Morbius would beat Venom, you're sorely mistaken. Because being able to lift heavy objects and deliver powerful punches aren't all it takes to be a successful hero. Captain America could lift about half of what Morbius does, and I'm not going to listen to you besmirch the good name of Cap. Compared to the average human, Morbius is much faster, and his stamina and agility are far superior. These are pretty standard superhuman traits that Venom also shares, but one of Morbius's abilities makes him stand out, and could provide a useful edge in the fight against Venom. I wish there was a more elegant way of phrasing this, but Morbius can smell really well. He's got a good snaz on him. He has fully operational olfactory capabilities that allow him to detect things from great distances. Even darkness doesn't provide a shroud, since Morbius can see into the infrared end of the electromagnetic spectrum. He can smell a drop of blood from miles away, so Venom can say goodbye to the element of surprise. Venom's a tough enemy to beat, there's no doubt about that. He can turn his body into pretty much anything, and even if his host is injured, he has incredible healing abilities. Morbius can heal quickly too, but he can't regenerate organs or limbs or anything too crazy. But there are a few areas in which I think Morbius has a definite edge over Venom. The first is one I briefly mentioned earlier, and that is his intelligence. Even though he's added the living vampire to his title, Morbius is still a doctor and a scientist. His background in biology means he could likely pinpoint Venom's specific weaknesses and design something to work against them. The movie version of Venom is pretty new to the superhuman scene, and he can't even stand hearing loud noises without totally losing it. His superhuman sensory abilities would ensure that he knows where Venom is and is able to put his plans into motion. Sure, in a straight-up punch-based battle, Venom hits harder, but pure brute force doesn't always win battles. Morbius has other powers that would be useful in a fight against Venom besides his intelligence. He's not quite as mighty, but his lightning-fast reflexes, bone-rending claws, and ability to heal quickly would buy him enough time to figure out a winning strategy. Then there's the possibility of Morbius making his own backup. Making friends is hard, but not when you're a vampire who can create vampiric entities using your supernatural powers. We all know about Carnage, Venom's son, for lack of a better term. He's a super powerful symbiote, but he's not someone that Venom has any control over, something that's been a frequent plot point in the comic books. So, while Venom can potentially make stronger allies than Morbius, there's really no guarantee they wouldn't just destroy their parent and everything else just for funsies. Morbius, on the other hand, can drain humans and exert complete and utter control over their minds. They have enhanced strength, which makes them useful, and they'll do anything Morbius commands them to. Sure, they'll collapse into a big pile of dust if they're mortally wounded, but he can just make a few more. And as if being able to put together a group of pseudo-vampires wasn't handy enough, Morbius can also use his powers to hypnotize people directly, turning them into unwilling servants. This most likely wouldn't work on Venom directly, since he's resistant to telekinetic interference. Although Jean Grey did manage to peek inside his noggin during the X-Men Blue Annual Volume No. 1. But Morbius wouldn't even have to control Venom himself in order to effectively use this power against him. He'd just need to get a hold of Van Weying or someone else Eddie Brock is fond of. Venom is at his best when he and his host are on the same page. And this would throw a massive wrench into their dynamic, probably enough to give Morbius a massive advantage. Venom isn't a warm, fuzzy guy, but in the comics, we've seen him care for people. He rescued Peter Parker even after he painfully rejected him, and he's looked out for Eddie when he was losing control. Being able to manipulate both Venom and his host is within Morbius's considerable power. Combined with his intelligence and Venom's serious weaknesses, I wouldn't place my bets on Venom if these two ever go up against each other. Well, what do you think about the potential matchup between these two Marvel comic book characters? Let us know if we're right about Morbius being more powerful or if you're not so secretly rooting for Venom. Don't forget to give this video a like and click on that subscribe button for more videos from CBR. As always, thanks for watching.